Good morning, First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me, Roy Kent, world-famous footballer, now trainer for AFC Richmond. That's a British football team, to help lead worship on this Halloween Sunday. I understand that you all like to dress up for Halloween, and I'm admiring the costumes I see before me. I want you to know I didn't have time to dress up in a costume, but I perfected the voice of one of your worship team, the Reverend Theresa rohlck. I think I'm doing a pretty good vocal impersonation, don't you? Thank you. I am here with my mates from England, Ted Lasso, my coach. You know, when he sings karaoke, his voice sounds a lot like your acting music director, Carter Smith. And my lovely girlfriend, Keely Jones. Love you, Keely. Who will be filling in as your executive minister, because Reverend Cassandra Hartley, because Keely is just darn good at running things. We three got a free ride from England to the US on the M pirate ship, piloted by someone who suspiciously looks like your senior minister, Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti. Thanks, M, for the ride. We got here just in time for Halloween. It's my first trip to the US, and some things here are really different. Like your musicians, you've hired a butterfly whose piano playing sounds uncannily like the world-famous Allison Halerz. I mean, how does a butterfly play piano? Do butterflies even have fingers? The ones in England don't. And live streamers, hello, welcome to you all as well. Now, I don't know how live stream magic happens by itself, because today, all I can say is I don't see anyone running the cameras. No one even resembling Mike Halerz. I mean, do you see him? Does anyone see him? I mean, usually he's here, he's there, he's everywhere. Oh wait, that's what they say about me. Anyway, it's like Mike is an invisible man or something. But I guess that's not so unusual on Halloween. Now, I have a few things you need to pay attention to. And pay attention or everyone will have to run laps around the building. If I see you are wearing masks inside and outside, thank you. That's really important. And if you are new, we are really glad you're here. There's a newcomer welcome that happens right after this service. You go out these doors, down a little bit, and on the right in the Jackson Chapel, someone will be there to help answer your questions and fill you in a bit more on this faith tradition. Now, today is Halloween, which marks the end of October. And next Sunday, we will begin focusing on November's theme of memory. Please join us for our annual service of remembrance, when we will honor those UUA members who have died over the past 2 years. We will also build a memory altar together, And for that, I invite you to bring a photo, an object, a small remembrance of a loved one in your own personal life who is no longer a physical presence on this earth. And we will create a space for these memories on November 7th. It's a sacred time we share together, and I hope you can attend. And if you'll be watching from home, you're also invited to have something ready for the altar. November 7th is also the end of daylight savings time, so make a note to adjust your clocks, especially for those like me who still use analog. And it's fall back, remember, so we gain an hour. So my fans and others, thank you for being here. We are gathered for one heck of a worship service. Don't get distracted by all this Halloween stuff. But please give your attention to Coach Lasso, who will lead us through some team bonding exercises. Coach.
Well, thanks, Roy. I really appreciate the introduction. Howdy, y'all. I'm Coach Lasso. Now, I heard the local football team came up a bit short yesterday, and I sure am sorry to hear that. You know, when my players back in England are struggling, I remind them that the happiest animal on the world is a goldfish, because a goldfish only has a 10-second memory. So just be a goldfish. Okay. So I think as a musician, I understand the reason why I typically sing roles and not necessarily act them. So I'll drop that bit of an act. But happy Halloween. It is wonderful to see you all this morning. I'll echo Reverend Theresa / Roy Kent's welcome to you this Halloween morning. And welcome to everyone gathered here in this space, as well as all of you joining us virtually. It is such a joy for us to be gathered here together. As we continue our time together, we'll start by lighting our chalice. We light this chalice each time we are gathered together to remind us of our connections with one another and the community that we have built. Today, Rebecca and Jim Sundberg are going to help us light our chalice here in this sanctuary. If you're joining us from home or at a later time and you have your own chalice, I invite you to take this moment to grab your chalice and join together with those who are gathered here in lighting our chalice this morning. Will you join me in our chalice lighting words? We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Thank you, Rebecca and Jim. We are a community bound together, not because we profess one single belief or creed, but because of the promises we make to each other. These promises help increase our relationships to one another and strengthen the bonds we have formed and continue to form with those who we are in community with. Let us join together in speaking the words of our covenant. The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth and love, and to help one another. Thank you.
Good morning. So today we are going to be celebrating Halloween, of course, but also we're going to be talking about beliefs and things that we can't necessarily see. And so I want to share a story that many of you are probably familiar with in the form of a movie, but today it's in the form of a book. And it's Charles Schulz. It's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Every fall, the leaves on the trees turn brown and fall off the branches. pumpkins grow big and plump in their patches. The air grows cooler, and people start to think about their Halloween costumes. And every fall, Linus writes a very important letter. Dear Great Pumpkin, Linus writes, I'm looking forward to your arrival on Halloween night. I hope you will bring me lots of presents. Who are you writing to? Asks Charlie Brown. The Great Pumpkin, Linus replies. On Halloween night, the Great Pumpkin rises out of the pumpkin patch and flies through the air with his bag of toys for all the children. Linus's sister Lucy isn't happy that Linus is writing to the Great Pumpkin. You'll make me the laughingstock of the neighborhood, she complains. But Charlie Brown's sister, Sally, doesn't think Linus is out of his mind. She thinks Linus is wonderful. He is her sweet baboo. Wouldn't you like to sit with me in the pumpkin patch on Halloween night and wait for the Great Pumpkin? Linus asks. Sally is thrilled. I'd love to, she tells Linus. Later that day, Charlie Brown has a surprise waiting for him in the mailbox. I got an invitation to a Halloween party, he exclaims. Lucy thinks the invitation must be a mistake. There were 2 lists, she tells Charlie Brown, one to invite and one not to invite. Charlie Brown knows which list he was probably on, but he decides to go to the party anyway. On Halloween night, everyone is planning to go to the party, except Linus. My blockhead brother will be out in the pumpkin patch making his yearly fool of himself, Lucy grumbles. She can't understand why he would choose to miss out on all the fun Halloween has to offer by sitting in a pumpkin patch. Everyone puts on their costumes. Lucy is dressed as a witch. Charlie Brown is dressed as a ghost, but no one can tell that because he had a little trouble with the scissors. Sally and Schroeder are also dressed as ghosts, but they figured out how to use the scissors just fine. Pigpen is dressed as a ghost too, and everyone can tell which one. Snoopy walks by, also dressed in a costume. Who in the world is that? Asks Lucy. He's a World War I flying ace, Charlie Brown explains. Now I've seen everything, Lucy says. Lucy declares that everyone will go trick-or-treating first and then go to the party. As they pass the pumpkin patch, Linus sees them and gets excited, thinking they've come to wait with him. Have you come to sing pumpkin carols with me? He asks. You blockhead, Lucy yells at her brother. You're going to miss all the fun, just like last year. Don't talk to me like that, Linus cries. The Great Pumpkin will come because I am in the most sincere pumpkin patch. Oh, good grief, Lucy exclaims. She marches off with her friends. It looks like no one wants to join Linus. Except, what about Sally? Sally is torn. She doesn't want to miss out on all the fun, but Linus is her sweet baboo. What should she do? She runs back to the pumpkin patch. I'm glad you came back, Linus tells her. You'll see the Great Pumpkin with your own eyes. Linus is positive the Great Pumpkin will pick this patch. Why wouldn't he? The Great Pumpkin chooses the most sincere patch to visit every year. And how could a pumpkin patch be more sincere than this one? Sally hopes Linus is right. Meanwhile, the rest of the kids go trick-or-treating. Trick or treats, money or eats, they yell at the first door. Everyone compares what they got. I got 5 pieces of candy, brags Lucy. I got a chocolate bar, exclaims Patty. I got a quarter, says Violet happily. I got a rock, says Charlie Brown sadly. And that happens at every door. All the kids get wonderful treats, and Charlie Brown gets rocks. Lucy decides they have done enough trick-or-treating and it's time for the party. After all, everyone has a bag filled to the brim with treats. Well, except Charlie Brown. He has a bag full of rocks. On their way to the party, they pass the pumpkin patch again. The kids laugh at Linus and Sally for waiting instead of coming to the party. The Great Pumpkin will be here, Sally yells, defending Linus. After they walk by, she turns to Linus. "All right, where is he?" she asks. "He'll be here," Linus assures her. "I hope so," says Sally. "Think of all the fun we're missing." And the Halloween party is a lot of fun, for everyone except Charlie Brown. At first, Charlie Brown thinks his night is looking up when they ask him to model for the jack-o'-lantern. It sounds like an honor, until he realizes that being the model means having Violet draw a pumpkin face on the back of his head. Meanwhile, in the pumpkin patch, Sally is growing tired of waiting for the great pumpkin. "If anyone had told me I'd be waiting in a pumpkin patch on Halloween night, I never would have believed them," she complains. Then she and Linus hear a rumbling noise. They see a shadow emerging from the pumpkin patch. "It's the great pumpkin rising out of the pumpkin patch," Linus yells. He's so excited that he faints. But it isn't the great pumpkin after all. It's just the World War I flying ace on his way back from an important mission. Linus wakes up and asks Sally what happened. "I was robbed," howls Sally. "Halloween is over and I missed it." She stomps out of the pumpkin patch, leaving Linus all alone to wait for the great pumpkin. He falls asleep waiting, and later that night, Lucy comes to bring him home and tuck him into his warm bed. The next day, Charlie Brown tries to make Linus feel better. "Don't take it too hard that the great pumpkin never showed up," he tells his friend. But Linus doesn't feel let down. "Just wait until next year," he tells Charlie Brown. "I'll find the most sincere pumpkin patch, and I'll sit in that patch until the great pumpkin appears." The end. Linus is certainly optimistic and sincere. And while most of us don't share his unshakable faith in the great pumpkin, we can at least understand what it means to commit to something that's important to us. In fact, our community exists because of this kind of commitment. Generation after generation, people have been giving of their time, their energy, their money, talent, and presence to sustain this congregation. Our weekly offering is a time for us to honor that legacy of commitment and to carry it forward for the next generations. This week, our offering will go to support our many ministries and programs. And you can make a donation by texting 73256 to UUAA. You can also go to uuaa.org/giving. And of course, you can leave your donations of cash or checks in the baskets as you leave. But however you give, thank you for your generosity and for your unshakable faith in all that we can build together. Thank you. I invite you all to rise in body or spirit and join me as we say the words to dedicate our offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. Thank you. You may be seated.
Arg! Good morning to you. If any of y'all pirates be out there, we set sail at 1. Don't you be late now. From the absurd, which is such a lovely part of Halloween, the very best part of Halloween, to the sublime. We're going to shift into a time of meditation and personal reflection. Grounded in Shambhala, in the Shambhala Buddhist practices, which I am trained and practice in myself for these purposes. Now, in those Buddhist traditions, time of meditation is framed by a little bit of instruction on the technicalities of meditative practice, as well as a guiding or framing thought. So on the technicalities, on those pieces, in this style of meditation, meditative practice, we keep our eyes open. I know many people are used to doing a meditative practice with eyes closed, so eyes open may feel unfamiliar. Push yourself to try it out. And gaze is always just a little bit forward, maybe towards the ground. Hands on your legs, back more straight, typically not slouching, not causing yourself any pain. And you know what your body can do or can't do better than I. Focusing as we can on our breath. Thoughts will arise. They always do. Our brains keep functioning until they're not. And we want them to function for as long as possible. So thoughts arise naturally. And instead of following the train of thought, see if you can notice the thought, lightly notice it, and release it, let it go. Those are the technical pieces of meditative practice in this type of tradition. For a guiding thought, I'm holding in my heart today my meditation teacher, Jerry Granelli. He's a jazz musician, beautifully fitting with today's service. He was the drummer for the Vince Guaraldi trio that did all of the background music for the Peanuts animation. Jerry just passed this summer, but I had the immense joy and pleasure of learning how to be present to meditative practice through him, a longtime Buddhist practitioner. And his most instrumental teaching to me in this regard, his gift to me, he would say, judgment is optional and in fact not necessary at all. So if you find yourself in the middle of a practice, or actually even life, most definitely a spiritual practice, I'm not doing this right. My posture's not right, my breathing's not right, I followed that train of thought, la, 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 la. Notice it. Notice you're criticizing yourself. Let it go. Just notice it and let it go. I've noticed somebody else, they're on their phone, they're staring out the window, they're not engaged with the practice, it must not be working for them either. Optional. Imposing our thoughts, opinions, judgments on others, about others, totally optional, absolutely unnecessary in the context of spiritual practice. It is a freeing, utterly freeing teaching to notice the often very common self-critiques and critiques and opinions and judgments of others that arise in our minds as human beings. Let it go. It's optional. With that teaching from my dear Jerry would you join me in a time of shared meditation and reflection? What a sweet, endearing figure Linus is in the story of the Great Pumpkin. So earnestly sitting in this pumpkin patch all by himself, holding faith in the thing that's unseen, but that he believes in. Sincere belief. Linus's sincere belief. Now, as a kid, when I was 5, 6 years old, I encountered Linus's sincere belief in the animated television special version of the story. Oh, the inner monologue. Probably I externalized it. Who the heck would do that? And miss out on trick-or-treating? That doesn't make any sense at all. My 5 or 6 year old judgmentalness, interacting with Linus's sincere belief. We'll return to that. Don't lose sight of that. We'll pause and return to that. This ineffable, intangible notion of something like a great pumpkin. We Unitarian Universalists, we have our own ineffable, intangible ideas as well, don't we? They're called the 7 principles. I'm going to shift from Charles Schulz, originator of the Peanuts, to a different Schulz, William Schulz, also known as Bill Schulz, who is a Unitarian Universalist, a clergy person, quite accomplished, actually so accomplished I would do injustice at even trying to mention his whole bio. But the snippets. Former president of our denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and former president of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. I think the only human being to have ever done both of those jobs. And former executive director / president of Amnesty International, and author of more books than I could name. I mean, it's an astonishing array of accomplishments. Bill Schulz, as somebody committed to the concept of human rights. And we, think a second about human rights, such lofty ideals, right? Such lofty principles that we ascribe to and try to hold ourselves up to as human beings and as societies on the planet. Think of the language in which we talk about rights, human rights. Think of the language in which we talk about our principles in these lofty moralistic statements, right? They often echo what in the field of philosophy and ethics is called natural law. Things that are just intrinsically true because they're woven into the very fabric of the universe. They're part of the woof and fiber of all that exists. They're that fundamentally true. That's what's called natural law, and for those of you who know philosophy, the thinking of Immanuel Kant is often associated with natural law. Now, Bill Schulz, his latest book, this was just from last year, 2020, it's called The Coming Good Society, written alongside Sushma Rahman, who's an academic at Harvard. This is the latest book in a series of writings and books that expound on the same idea. Bill Schulz does not believe in natural law at all. At all. So Bill's basic premise is that rights of any kind are made up. They are a human construct, and we as humans are the ones that imbue the made-up stuff that we call rights with meaning. And among many, many examples, so the book from 2020 that I just showed you, the entire book is an exposition on what I'm summarizing very quickly. But take, for example, one example among many that are possible, the Americans with Disability Act. 150, 200 years ago, there was no such conception of disability rights. It is something that has evolved with human understanding. As human understanding has evolved and changed, consensus emerges. As consensus emerges, we then codify the new understanding in something that's a law, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Once something's codified as a right, then we imbue it with further meaning. Oh my, we know, I mean, this is our passion zone as Unitarian Universalists. If a right is being violated, we UUs will be the first one to be the most passionate ones, showing up with our indignation and righteousness in the name of justice. It's us. We are the foremost leaders of that justice-moving energy in passionate support of rights. All that, Schulz has said for a long time, based not in natural law, the woof and fabric of the universe as it existentially exists, but in human process, grounded in human constructs that are beliefs. That doesn't mean they're meaningless. Absolutely not. All you have to do is look at any UU when we're interacting with a justice issue and the level of passion and commitment we bring to it. It doesn't mean that it's meaningless. But what we lose sight of occasionally is that, we made it up. And because we made it up, we can adapt it, we can change it, it can evolve over time, but we made it up. That's Bill Schulz's primary point. Now, bring this to Unitarian Universalism, would you, for just a second? The first principle, for those who may not know, the inherent worth and dignity of every person is the exact language of that first Unitarian Universalist principle. Now, Bill Schulz, his earlier book, is an earlier book in which he addresses that very point, our first principle, which he also says is made up. Now, if it isn't made up, what's it grounded in? If it's a theorem that has a proof, the proof doesn't exist. I've never seen it, right? That makes it a belief. A postulate, continuing with the language of mathematics, not a theorem with a proof, but rather a postulate, something that we assert is true, and then we imbue with meaning, a lot of meaning, actually. Now, it's not based on data. It's not based on metrics. It's not based on a formula or a proof of any kind. It's a belief. Now, here's the interesting thing, and I'm going to be I love being intentionally provocative every now and again. Some of you know that about me. And as I do so, the gentle reminder is that agreement, disagreement, either, both, neither with your minister is not a precondition to being a Unitarian Universalist. Most of us know this. If you didn't know this, now you do. And if you already knew it, it's the gentle reminder. You're never expected to agree or disagree with me or either, both, neither. That's besides the point. I'm just offering some provocative questions. Now, in the field of religion and spirituality, a statement of belief that doesn't have any proof behind it, but we subscribe to anyway, earnestly and with commitment, what do we call that? Isn't that called a creedal statement? We who profess to be a non-creedal religion, I'm just being provocative, a little playful here. Oh, another one in the spirit of provocative playfulness. We who have these principles that have no proof or metrics or empirical reasoning behind them, what does that mean about our self-identification as a religion of rationalism and empiricism? It might just mean simply that rationalism for us is a process of discernment, which I would offer that every Unitarian Universalist I know engages in earnest, heartfelt discernment about their own sense of purpose and meaning in life. Which brings me back to Linus, sitting there so earnestly in his belief, his sweet belief in that pumpkin patch. Maybe we UUs have some more things in common with Linus than we would typically admit to even ourselves. Isn't that interesting? And if only these were, the kind of judgmentalness I brought to poor Linus, my 5, 6-year-old self, if only we kind of did that thing, that judgy, opinion-y thing when we were kids. It's not just a kid thing, is it? This past week, I attended a family funeral on the Marzetti side of our family, which is devoutly Catholic. And so the final rites included an entombment. Now, most of you know, my upbringing's Eastern spirituality, Buddhism, Hinduism, not this. And in the Catholic version, which includes entombment, you get a coffin that's not going to easily decay to begin with, sealed up in plastic that's not going to decay, all of that sealed in impenetrable marble. I mean, I was present to all of this. Oh, if you could have heard the thoughts in my mind as all of this was going on. I had a PhD dissertation that I could have written later on, explicating Hinduism and Buddhism's notions of recycling and being one with the earth and going back to, and I even added in elements of environmentalism and sustainable land use and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I had the whole PhD dissertation ready to go. And then I even began, during the wake, as we're socializing, dropping little hint, who might agree with me? Let's drop a little hint here or there and see who's out there that might agree with. This is not our best selves as Unitarian Universalists. We know this. And yet we do it. Notice the aggressive energy embedded in that. The judginess, of course. The judgmentalness, of course. But then the aggression of, I'm going to go out and find somebody who agrees with me. Give them my mental PhD thesis that's rolling around in my head. Why? To enhance my self-esteem, to prove that I'm right to the other people, the world, to myself, to feel better about myself, as family members are grieving. What the heck? There are other ways of being together that are far better, far healthier. I was reminded of this this week. There are these moments of serendipity where things just come together in a certain way of grace, what I would call grace and beauty. And my husband had been reminding me for a little while that so some of you know I love science fiction and horror. These are not for everybody, so I know this. We're each unique and individual and have our own relationships with the holy and divine and things that speak to us. But for me, science fiction and the horror genres can have great meaning when they're done well. And my husband had been reminding me, Netflix, you haven't seen Midnight Mass yet, the horror series. You need to see Midnight Mass. And then a week to 10 days ago, a congregant said the same thing to me. And then, lo and behold, these things intersecting, and I pay attention when things intersect, they intersected. I watched this. I have to say, if this is the type of genre that might appeal to you, it's You should check it out. It is masterful. The only time I have ever seen any horror movie, TV show, where I have on multiple occasions wept at different points in time for the sheer beauty of what's being depicted. Not all of it, but moments. Moments. Rare and masterfully done. And among the many things that are masterful in this piece of art, creation, drama, there's a series of monologues that occur. Now, Halloween is a playful way of interacting with the concept of death and spirits. And there's a series of monologues on the topic of death, and two of the characters go back and forth with one another. What do you believe about death? What do you believe about death? There's a beauty just in that. They're not trying to convince each other of anything because they have very different theological positions, and they're good friends. One's an absolute committed atheist, and the other is a devout theist. And so they frame it as, no, you yourself, not for everybody out there, for the rest of the world, just you yourself. And they even hesitantly say to one another, me, myself, just for me, myself. Yeah. What do you believe about death? And thus ensues this series of monologues in the context of one of the characters is a guy and there's a woman. She's just had a miscarriage. And they're grieving together. He's the atheist. He goes first. When I die, my body stops functioning, shut down all at once, or gradually. My breathing stops, my heart stops beating. Clinical death. And a bit later, like 5 whole minutes later, my brain cells start dying. But in the meantime, in between, maybe my brain releases a flood of DMT. It's the psychedelic drug released when we dream, so I dream. I dream bigger than I've ever dreamed before because it's all of it. It's the last dump of DMT all at once, and my neurons are firing, and I'm seeing this firework display of memories and imagination, and I'm just tripping. I mean, really tripping, because my mind's rifling through the memories, long and short term, and the dreams mix with the memories, and it's a curtain call. The dream to end all dreams. One last great dream as my mind empties the missile silos, and then I stop. My brain activity ceases, and there is nothing left of me. No pain, no memory, no awareness that I ever was, no awareness that I ever hurt someone, that I ever killed someone. Everything is as it was before me. And the electricity disperses from my brain till it's just dead tissue, meat, oblivion, and all the other little things that make me up, the microbes, the bacterium, and the billion other little things that live on my eyelashes and in my hair and in my mouth and on my skin and in my gut and everywhere else, they just keep living and eating. And I'm serving a purpose. I'm feeding life. And I'm broken apart, and all the littlest pieces of me are just recycled. And I'm billions of other places, and my atoms are in plants and bugs and animals, and I'm like the stars that are in the sky there one moment and then just scattered across the whole cosmos. His atheistic version. And he says to his friend, and you? What about you? Yeah, just you, yourself. What do you believe? She says, I'm not the one that died today. She, the fetus, was never awake. When she came down into this little body, this just forming little body, It was asleep. So all she ever knew was dreaming. So she only ever dreamed. She didn't even have a name. And then in her sleep, that perfect little spirit just lifted up. Because God didn't send her to suffer through life on earth. No, not this one, no. This special little soul, God just sent her down here to sleep. Just a little nap, a quick dream. And then he called her back. He wanted her back, and so she went back. Same as she floated down, she rose up above the earth, past all the souls in the atmosphere and all the stars in the sky, and then into a light so bright. And then, for the first time, she starts to wake up. She's wrapped in a feeling of love, just pure, amazing love. Of course she is. She's pure. She's never sinned, never hurt a single living thing, not even an ant. And she's not alone. She's home. There are people there. She doesn't know it, but they're her family. Her grandfather, her great-grandfather, and they love her. And the second he says her name, she grows up in a blink, and she's perfect. Her body as it would have been as on her best day on earth, her perfect age, the peak of herself. And they tell her about her mom down here on earth and how I'll soon be there with her. She's happy and nothing but joy for all eternity. And she's loved, and she isn't alone. And that's what we mean when we say heaven. No mansions, no rivers of diamonds, no fluffy clouds, or angel wings. You're loved and you aren't alone. That is God. That is heaven. That's why we endure all that we endure on this big, blue, sad rock. And they're present to each other in this dialogue, just fully present to one another, not trying to convince one another that they need to have some other perspective or opinion about the nature of life and death. Notice in the Peanuts story, Linus is not an evangelist. He does not try to convince any other person to join him in the pumpkin patch. The series goes on, this dialogue, as the character, the woman, later, she herself is dying. In the final moments, the final last breaths, this dialogue continues as she's dying. Myself, remember how they pose the questions to one another? What do you yourself believe? Myself, myself. That's the problem. That's the whole problem with the whole thing, that word, self. That's not the word. That's not right. That isn't. How did I forget that? When did I forget that? The body stops a cell at a time, but the brain keeps firing those neurons, little lightning bolts, like fireworks inside. And I thought I'd despair or feel afraid, but I don't feel any of that. None of it. Because I'm too busy. I'm too busy in the moment, remembering, of course. I remember that every atom in my body was forged in a star. This matter, this body is mostly empty space after all. And solid matter, it's just energy vibrating very slowly. It's why there is no me. There never was. The electrons of my body mingle and dance with the electrons of the ground below me and the air I'm no longer breathing. And I remember There's no point where any of that ends and I begin. I remember that I am energy, not memory, not self. My name, my personality, my choices all came after me. I was before them, and I will be after, and everything else is pictures picked up along the way. Fleeting little dreamlets printed on the tissue of my dying brain. And I am the lightning that jumps between them. I am the energy firing the neurons, and I'm returning. Just by remembering, I am returning home, and it's like a drop of water falling back into the ocean of which it's always been a part. All things apart. You, me, my little girl, my mother, my father, everyone who's ever been, every plant, every animal, every atom, every star, every galaxy, all of it. More galaxies in the universe than grains of sand on the beach. And that's what we're talking about when we say God, the cosmos, and its infinite dreams. We are the cosmos dreaming of itself. It's simply a dream that I think is my life every time. I'll forget this. I always do. I always forget my dreams. But now, in this split second, in the moment I remember, the instant I remember, I comprehend everything at once. There is no time. There is no death. Life is a dream. It's a wish made again and again and again and again and again on into eternity, and I am all of it. I am everything. I am all. I am that. I am. We, each of us, atoms forged in the Big Bang, of energy that we cannot even comprehend, of such grandeur, immensity, enormity, embodied in each and every one of us, forgetting, getting wrapped up in collecting monopoly money, somehow deciding that the hoarding of it defines a life well lived, fighting over Lego pieces, carrying and holding slights and resentments, magnifying them into stories that carry meaning across decades and even generations. We forget. And yet the deeper call is always to remember. Remember your grandeur. Remember what you come from. The enormity, the immensity, the beauty of it. For when we do, that's when we can move into, be the higher, better selves that we are always called to be. May we each live today, live the week ahead, live our whole lives, knowing that we are that grand. join me if you would. Rise if you would, as you're comfortably able. As you head into the rest of this day, this particular day, may it be one in which little ones in our town, our region, your neighborhood, wherever you are running around nearby you, reminding you of that intrinsic creative spontaneity that's a part of the universe of which we are a part, and the joy that can emerge from that. The joy at simply having another day like today, to be creation, to be the cosmos experiencing itself. For that is what you are, what we are. Go forth into this new week, holding one another in love and care, knowing that you are held in the expansive embrace of this community. Until we meet again, may it be so.